As part of our college readiness series for parents, I wanted to talk about junior year because I know that when I had a student entering their junior year of high school, I started to wonder, what is my responsibility here? How can I best support my student? And what do I need to know as a parent of an impending college student? So today we're going to talk about that. What are you wondering what you need to do as a parent of an upcoming high school junior to prepare for the college process? So let's get started. So I want to start with if you Google, what does my kid need to know junior year? How do I prep for college my junior year of high school? If you look that up and Google gives you like 22 things that you're supposed to have prepared or start to know, things like building your resume and going on visits and looking at internships, which whatever. I think that is the part where that made me go, wait a minute, looking for internships for what? So I wanted to give you, from both a mother of three and a psychologist who deals a lot with adolescents and the behaviors of adolescents, and parents and the behaviors and relationships between parents and their adolescents, I wanted to start with the sort of three big buckets that I think you need to be worried about or looking at. You shouldn't be worried about anything junior year, quite frankly, other than maybe what you're going to wear to the homecoming dance. But there are three kind of categories that I think, okay, you could be thinking of those things junior year, and they will be helpful. If you start thinking about this stuff freshman year or sophomore year, my experience has been all that does is burn kids out, either through the college process or by the time they get to college, they're burned out, they're upset, they're frustrated, they have wasted their high school years trying to prepare for college. Sometimes they don't even get into the colleges they're trying to prepare for. So my very first recommendation would be, don't make this a priority until they are juniors. Freshman and sophomore year, they should just be able to be freshmen and sophomore in high school. There's so much growth that's happening. There's so much brain development happening. There's so much social and emotional change that should be what they're focused on, figuring out high school. By junior year, everybody's talking about college. You might as well start talking about it in your house too. But I want to focus on the three things that I think are really important to be focused on and kind of quiet some of the other noise. And the very first thing, and you will find this on Google if you look it up, is resume building. And I want to start there because I think this is where we tend to get overwhelmed. This is where relationships tend to break down. This is where kids seem to get super stressed. This is where parents seem to get super stressed. So one thing is, colleges aren't as easily impressed with what they used to maybe be easily impressed with. They no longer want a laundry list of things that kids do. They instead want to see evidence of a dedicated and open to learning type of student. So jobs count, mowing your neighbor's lawn counts, evidence that you were dedicated to a team for a long time, or that you were a theater kid for a long time, or maybe you did the lights for your high school theater productions, or maybe you've been in the chess club, or maybe you tutor kids at the local library. Any kind of service work, sports, activities outside of school, any of those things, that helps build your resume. There's no longer sort of a magic thing to do. No more. I'll never forget when my oldest was a senior, I think, we had a college advisor come in and speak to the parents. And they said, if I have to read one more essay about building a latrine in some, subterranean continent, then I don't want that kid anymore. And so their point was, these sort of mission trips and service trips that kids went on just so that they could write about them for their college essays, they're sort of onto that trick. And so that's not a thing that really helps anymore. So whatever your kid's doing, encourage it. Encourage them to find a thing that they want to do and love to do, and then stick with that thing. The key phrase here is encourage. So encouraging your kids in this time to be curious about not just the world around them, but really about what feels right and good to them. Using all of these resources and all of these options and things that they could be able to do in their life, whether it's working at a job or, working at a law office over the summer, or something that is either career focused or is just to make money. It's okay. Encourage them to be curious in those roles. And the emphasis there is on encourage, because this shouldn't be a time where you impose what you think on your kids, which is really hard to do. We've spent most of their lives doing that, not imposing, but most of their lives sort of giving advice and helping them see things and problem solving and guiding them. And now is the time where you kind of start to pull back a little so that they can take a more prominent role in deciding what's good. So you're going to encourage them to see the world in however way they can from their neighborhood, town, school, or whatever, and then tune into their own selves to see, like, what is it that is exciting to me? What is it that I love? What your job is as a parent is to tune into your own expectations. Now is the time, because you are about to join in this process with them, and you need to figure out your own stuff here. Not only what are your expectations and desires for them, but check in to make sure they're actually for your kid and not for you in some reason. Some of us absolutely loved college and we just want to live it again. Some of us hated college and we don't want our kid to have to repeat the same mistakes. So we put them in, certain things and we try to prep them, or maybe we didn't have things growing up and they do. And so we want them to take advantage of every single thing. And in any of those cases, our own stuff gets in the way of their college process. So tune in, take some time with yourself, really pay attention to what am I looking to get out of this? And there's a whole episode on that. So go back and listen to that episode about the 4 pillars of explicit parenting within the college process. And we talk a lot more about how we as parents need to tune into our own stuff before we jump into this with our kids. So once you do that, check in to make sure what you're doing is for them, not for you. And then as you're going through this, notice what lights them up as they try new things, what makes them excited, and then talk to them about it. Tell them what you notice about that, and then check in on how they feel. Hey, you've been playing baseball since you were 5 years old. Do you still love it so much? What do you love about it? Do you love the sport? Do you love the team camaraderie? Do you love having a schedule? Start to get them to notice how they feel about the things that you're noticing, because that's going to go into our next part. But the important part there is don't assume you know. Don't assume you know best, and don't assume you know them as well as you think you might, because they've been growing and changing, and so have you. So check in, tell them what you're seeing, and then ask them to help you understand it more. That opening of the dialogue is so important because it lets them know you trust them to be part of this process with you. You're not going to put this college process on them wholly, and you're not going to impose your stuff all over their college process either. When we get to the third part of this, that's going to help. That relationship and that understanding that we're in this thing together is going to help when we talk about parameters and boundaries. So the other thing that's going to come up a lot junior year is starting to research colleges and majors. And this can be a really anxiety-inducing activity for everyone, for the students, for you. So you can think of this in 2 different ways. You can use their activities, their clubs, their sports, etc., their best classes in school, whatever it is, to help them find their niche and then use that for investigating colleges and majors. If a kid really knows they want to be something or they want to do something after, that's a really great place to start with colleges. If they have no idea, it can sometimes be really overwhelming. So I would start with that question of, well, what do you like? What's fun for you at school? What isn't fun for you at school? It's just as helpful to eliminate as it is to add things in. So what works at school? What do you love about your job? What do you love about babysitting? What do you love about, whatever it is that you do now that you like, what is it that you love about it? Now, if what they love at their ice cream job is ice cream, that's not necessarily a place to start, but you could probably tease out a few more things. Maybe they love their coworkers. Maybe they love having a set schedule or not a set schedule. Maybe they like working nights, things that help them start to understand who they are and what lights them up, and then move into this other stuff. Whether you know a major or not, whether you have a niche or not, these other areas are really important when talking about where you might want to go and what you might want to do. And so either way, whether you know exactly what you want to do and study, or if you have no idea, these are still things you should focus on, which is asking them about geography. Where do they want to go? It's kind of an East Coast of the United States thing that we go everywhere for college. It's starting to become a little bit more common in other parts of the country, but we will go completely across the country from the East Coast, and sometimes you get some West Coasters, but it's a little over here on the East Coast, but it's a little less common, I think, the farther west you go in the country, that people go very, very far from home for college. I wish it was that way on the East Coast. We have a million colleges on the East Coast that are wonderful and amazing and close to home. But it's important to ask the kids if they want to go to across the country. Well, why? Investigate that a little bit further, and not why in an accusatory way, but why in a, what, have you thought this through? What is it that you like about there? Why do you want to go that far? If it's simply just to get the heck away from my family, talk about that. You know, what do you think you're going to find out there that you don't have here? Same thing with size of the school. Do you want it to be huge? Do you want it to be small? Do you want it to have many majors? This is where it kind of comes into play if you know what you want to study or you don't. Because if you don't know what you want to study, you might be better off going to a place that has some options that you can choose from. You know, if you're somebody who's either going to be a chemist or a playwright, that's a real specific set of things that you might want to choose between. So you want to look at the size, not only of population, but what they offer. Is it a big state school with a whole bunch of majors, or is it a little tiny liberal arts college that doesn't have an engineering program? You know, keep in mind what you generally want and the size of the university and the size of the student population. And also then you get into school environment. It is important. Is it important for your student to be at a place that has big time sports? It might not be, and it might be, and you might be surprised at the answer to that. I have 3 kids and 2 of them are at a school with big time sports. I would never have expected the first one to choose a school with big time sports. And she might be the biggest sports fan of the 3 at the end of the 4 years of college. But what she knew she wanted was a sort of quote unquote stereotypical college experience. She wanted it to be somewhat big. She wanted it to have a lot of options. She wanted there to be school spirit. She wanted people to care about their university that they went to, just as a matter of, you know, being a student there. She really went to a place that has all those things, more maybe than she even realized. The youngest, who I never would have expected would have wanted a big time sports school, has really said, you know, I'd really like it if there was a thing for students to be able to go to, a basketball game or, you know, whatever. He's not a big football person. He's been to the oldest one's football school and he's not a big football person. So, you know, he is now looking and he said, you know, I think I'd be okay if they had like a decent basketball team, or at least a basketball team that kids cared about. So sports are a thing. The Greek system is a thing. If your kid wants to be in a fraternity or sorority, you might have some opinions on that, but they also might have opinions on that. So ask them about that. Are there a lot of clubs? Is there a busy student government? Is it in a geographic location that allows them to ski or hike or bike or swim? All of these things are questions that you could ask them, and also point out what you notice about them. Hey, you surf every morning at 5 a.m. Do you think you should really go to a school in the middle of the United States where there's no water? You know, those types of things. Look, the answer to that question might be yes. They might say, I want to go somewhere completely different. So rather than you telling them, I think that's crazy because you surf every morning, ask them, well, what happens when you can't surf? What do you like? If surfing is a thing you use to sort of keep your mental health and your mental wellness, are you going to be okay without that? What will you do instead? I'm really interested in taking up mountain biking. Great. That Colorado place sounds exactly right. You know, whatever the case is, you're asking them. You're not telling them and you're not imposing on them what you think they need to hear. You're asking them the questions, and then you can point out what you notice. You know, you have never really liked sleepovers at other people's homes. You like to be near our home. Do you really think you want to go to school 3,600 miles away? You know, and that was a lot of sarcasm in my voice. You shouldn't do that. Ask those questions openly in a way that they can give you an honest answer, and it forces them to think about those things because they're still teenagers, as we know. So the many dots that we connect, they're still not connecting all the time, but they're connecting more than we think. So ask the question, help guide them by telling them what you notice. A lot of the information I just talked about, the geography, the student population, the environment of the campus, you know, is it a commuter school? Are there a lot of people there that live right in the geographic area? You can sometimes even find out the breakdown of the student population. What are the different nationalities represented? What are the different, you know, geographic areas represented at the school? Much of that information can be found on tools that your kids probably have access to through their schools. I know my kids have used things called Score and Naviance over the years. I'm sure there's 1,000 other ones out there, but they're just aggregates where you can put in, here are the things I want, and it'll list a bunch of colleges for you. And within those columns, the ones my kids use, within the columns, you can compare the different universities, the tuition, the student population, the different majors, all the way down. So your role as a parent is to tune into your own reactions about the above things. Do you not want them to go 3,600 miles away? Do you not want them to go to school in the middle of the country? Do you not think they should go to school at the beach? Do you not, all of the things that you're having a reaction to, tune into that and sort of ask yourself why. What's going on for me? Why am I freaking out about this? I had a situation where and I think I talk about this in the other episode, I thought I was going to go to school in California. I grew up right outside Washington, D.C., and I thought I was going to go to school in California. And at the 11th hour, my mother said, no, you're definitely not going to school in California. Sorry, it wasn't even Southern. It was Northern California. And I had no idea why she would do that. And so then, a million years later, when my kids were college age and one of them came to me and said, I want to go to school in Southern California. Of course, I did not want to say yes to that. I wanted to say, no, you can't go. There's no way you're going that far away, and there's no way this and there's no way that. But I didn't, because that happened to me as a kid. And I still remember not loving that feeling. And so I said, okay, let's go. Tell me why. What's there? What do you love? What can you get there that you can't get somewhere else? And then we went about our journey of applying to all those places. So I had to know my own sort of trigger point with that was, look, this happened to me. And also I don't want them to go that far away from me. So how do I reconcile those two things? So your role is to tune into your own reactions. And then the second part of this is talk to your partner, or whoever the other parent is, whether you're together or not. If you can talk to them, whoever is helping you with this process of financing and, sending this kid off, talk to them as much as you can and discuss the boundaries around distance, money, and time. Some people absolutely do not want their kid to be somewhere where they have to fly. That makes sense. That's a whole other budgetary item that you need to talk about. Some people have X amount of money for college, and that doesn't include, 2-hour plane trips, or it does include, 6-hour car rides, but not 14-hour car rides or something like that. A kid doesn't have, if the kid isn't going to have a car, are you willing to take the time to go and pick them up from a place that's more than 4 or 5 hours away? So have these conversations with each other about boundaries, and then have that conversation with your kid without trying to impose them. My mother sort of unilaterally, without any explanation, was like, absolutely not. You can't go to school in California. As it turns out later, when I talked to her as a grown adult, she couldn't afford the tuition in California. And she was afraid that I would never come home. And look, that was a legitimate fear, but it would have been nice if she told me that. And I could have assured her, at least at the time, like, that's not my plan. I would like to go there. For instance, my kid said, I'd really like to go there because I know I don't want to live there because I think it's too expensive and too far away from my family. Like, I don't want to spend my whole life away from my family. But what a great opportunity to be able to go to school there and experience it for the 4 years of school. If we hadn't had that conversation, I might have been more anxious and imposed on them, no, you can't go. So know your own boundaries, know your own trigger points, know your own reactions, discuss with your partner your boundaries, the realistic boundaries of time, distance, money, etc. And then have a conversation with them before they get too far into the process and fall in love with the California school you're not going to let them go to. And then finally, in the preparation field, and again, if you Google this, you're going to come up with like 50 different things. But in the preparation field, I'm going to keep it to some sort of nitty gritty stuff. The obvious is the SAT and ACT, either or both, depending on your colleges. This is one of those places where it helps, one of those topics where it helps to know where you might be looking, because some schools need the SAT, some schools don't. Some schools want the ACT, some schools take both. And so whichever one you think you'll do better on, that might be the way to do it. Check your colleges and see who's still test optional. Some are. And then check with your high school to see if they offer any kind of preparation. One of my kids had an incredible, SAT prep course at school. And also she learned how to, she completely wrote and completed and edited and rewrote a college essay in class junior year. So check with your school and see, or have your kid check with their school and see, what do you have on here? Do you have an on-site SAT? A lot of times, if these bigger high schools will offer an SAT on a Saturday at the high school, and there's something really nice about being able to go to your home place and take that test. So ask about that. Check the dates for that. This is not too early. Junior year is not too early for this. And in fact, sometimes the SATs and ACTs, you might start checking end of sophomore year just so you know the dates ahead of time. College Board is where you register for all those tests. And your kid will need a profile on College Board, and they can register. That's where they get their scores now. But you want to both check at the colleges, if you know them, of do they take these tests or not? What scores do they need? And then you want to check with the high schools to see, is there anything you offer that would help my kid in this area? Chances are probably pretty good they took the PSAT in high school. And so using those scores, so they might already have a College Board account, and using those scores will help them to kind of know in an area what they need to work on or where they need to work on anything. And then if you also have the information about what colleges they're looking at and what those scores need to be, then that's helpful too, because you can do something, and you'll learn about this at your high school nights, called a super score, where you take the best. If let's say you take the SAT 3 times, I'm not sure about the ACT. Only one of my kids took that, so I'm more versed on the SAT. But if you take the SAT 3 times, and your first time you got the best possible math score, and your last time you got the best possible English score, language score, you can combine those and submit that to colleges. So it's these are weird little tips and tricks about the tests that your school might have a whole night on or something there. So check with colleges and then check with the high schools. Organizing your college information. Again, some of those tools I talked about before that are probably available through your kid's school can help them organize, where they're applying, or even at this part of the journey, just where they're looking, and be able to compare those things together. I know other families that have spreadsheets. I know other families that have giant whiteboards, and this will come more into play senior year, because that's when you start using them to track when things are due and what you have and what you don't have and all of that stuff. But look inside those tools that the schools offer and see what they have as far as how you can organize all this information in one place. And then once they've kind of started to narrow it down, map out your visits, where are you going to go when, because sometimes you might be able to catch a couple colleges on your way to a trip for Easter, or going to visit family in the winter, or going skiing in the winter, or, going to your summer vacation. You might drive past 3 different colleges. And so you can make that part of your trip. I know lots of juniors in high school who their spring break is spent with parents driving around to different colleges, and that's kind of the entire week's vacation. So mapping out those visits, and then looking at your calendars and the kids' calendar and blocking out time for any of those tours. Not all of them have to happen junior year, and you don't even have to look at everything before you apply, but it is there's so much information online, actually. You don't even have to go necessarily to these colleges, but sometimes it's good if you're going to be in the area to see it, to compare it, to look at that, big versus small, state school versus private, that kind of thing. Sometimes it's nice to see it in person. So block out time, look at your calendars, see if there's any opportunities already built in, and also budget, because those types of trips aren't cheap. And so you might say, okay, well, you have 10 colleges on your list, but we can afford 3 visits, or we can afford 1 visit if you hit all 4 of these schools in 24 hours or something like that. Know where you want to go and what you want to do, and then budget for those things. And then if it's not in the budget, they'll be fine applying without having to go. You can always visit after they get in before they make their decision. You can also think about, or actually do, depending on the high school, gather your letters of recommendation from teachers in the building. Again, look towards your high schools for this. In the spring of junior year, they're going to have an idea of what they want. Either they want you to reach out to those teachers, or they want you to actually start getting them from those teachers. But either way, your high school is going to have a way of doing it, because the guidance counselors will help them get their letters of recommendation to upload into their applications. And then you can also start researching scholarships that are in your local area, Elks clubs, or, 4-H clubs, or, churches or community organizations that are local that might offer students some money for college. I remember a long time ago, I don't know if it still exists, but where I live, there was a local high school. Yeah, there was a local, it was the local teachers union that gave a scholarship to a high school student who was going to go study education. again, I don't know if it exists anymore, but there are things like that out there. So if you just start kind of Googling or talking to the counselor at school and asking, like, what do you know about, if you're a person who plays golf and, also is going to study botany or, whatever, like there's just stuff out there for, there's kind of a lid for every pot in that regard. So start looking for scholarships, things like that. And so your role as a parent here is to talk with your partner early about money and time and expectations for all of these things, for the visits, for the applications, for the SAT, for the prep courses. If you want to pay for a prep course, if you can afford to pay for a prep course, not everybody can. If you want to hire a college counselor, again, not everybody can. I have not done it one time, and all three of my kids are, well on their way, if not already in good colleges. So it's not a necessity, but for some people, it's great. I always tell parents, if you find yourself fighting with your kid too much, hire somebody else if you have the means to do that. If you don't have the means to do it, don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. Especially if you do all these things on here and talk and tune in and understand your boundaries and your expectations. So talk with your partner about that and be really clear on your budget and your time constraints for preparation in any way. And then talk with your kid about how you can help with the organization. So don't show up tomorrow with the big whiteboard from Staples and say, this is where we're going to keep track of all your college information. Talk to them. What works for them? You might be surprised with what they have going on. And it also gives them an honest time to say, yeah, I'm bad at this. I don't know. You can gently go there and say, I've noticed you've had trouble keeping track with assignments. I noticed you've had trouble keeping track of things. This is a lot of information, and I want to help you, if that's okay, keep track of all the information. I can either show you a way to do it in Score, or whatever, Naviance or whatever. Like, you can get into those accounts and say, hey, I noticed this thing on this account. If you put all these colleges together, you can compare them right in a row. You can sort of introduce that to them. Hey, I was playing around on it today and I noticed this. Maybe you want to take a look. Or you can say, I love spreadsheets, or I love whiteboards, or I want an excuse for this. Would it be okay if we put this up on your wall, or if I put it on my computer and shared it with you, and we can just add to this document back and forth together? What would work best for you? Again, this is their process. So while, yes, you need to know your boundaries and your parameters and all of that stuff, you also need to make sure they are included in it and you are not just doing it to them or for them. They are part of it, and you are there to be the scaffolding and support around them. So then you can also organize your own calendar and budget for visits and prep courses and all of the above. So resume building, preparation, and researching. Those are your three sort of buckets for junior year of high school. The preparation that includes some test taking, the researching that includes like figuring out sort of who you are and what interests you and how you might like to see yourself in the next 4 years. And then, in any order, you can start doing the activities and the fun things and the taking note and noticing, oh yeah, I'm a member of the Spanish Honor Society. I forgot that. Like, it's kind of amazing sometimes what kids do and don't even realize that it's part of this process. And so, if they've been part of the Minecraft club for 6 years, or 4 years in high school, you can note that on a resume. So just kind of getting them thinking about, well, what have you done? What are you proud of? What would you like to share? And what do you know you're going to do going forward? Most importantly, keep checking in with your own self. So you understand this is not your college process. This is their college process. And the outcome that we all want is for our kids to be happy. It doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter how. If they are happy at the place where they end up, they will be happy in their adulthood. And that's more important than any kind of panache that comes with a certain university or a place that you might think you want them to go. Hang in there. You got this, and you guys are all going to be great. Just stay curious and keep talking to your kids.